Hey folks, welcome to Airtime Paintball, where people come to find out all the information they need to get good deals on paintball stuff. I've been talking about this video for months, and I'm finally found the time to do it. We're going to take this brand new, never been out of the box Emek. I think I opened the box and checked it out once, and that's it. And we're going to use all this cool stuff, and we're going to soup to nuts build it into a super cool, hot-rodded Emek. Right here. All right, so hot rodded Emek. I said we're going to build it right here. Actually, not going to build it right here. I'm going to build it right over there. But I'm going to make the video, and I'm going to demonstrate how all these different parts go in. We've got Pops ASA, cool aftermarket stuff, triggers, bolt. We got a deli winds, hair valve, of course barrels, pretty obvious, feed neck, all kinds of stuff, custom body, and we're going to go through the whole thing front to back and make a video completely installing all that stuff, or kind of transforming the Emek into what it's going to be when we're done. And hopefully it's going to be super cool, and you'll be able to use this. You can watch it for fun, obviously, or if you want to use it to sort of figure out how to do some or all of these mods, it's probably going to be kind of a long video, but you can pause it, start and pause, and sort of use it as a guide to each part of, as far as installing all the various mods. So, yeah, let's get to it. All right, so here we are with our brand new Emek, and we're going to unbox this thing. We're going to go through and do all these parts, and one thing at a time. Look at that. Say hello to your little friend. Well, your new Emek anyway. So we're going to open this up. We got the manual here, all this new great stuff, tools, O-rings, grease, barrel cover, all good. Here's our brand new Emek, and I'm going to go ahead and leave the stock barrel in the box because we won't be using that. So let's just put this here. All right, I'm going to put this box aside. All right, first things first, I can't stand these stickers, so they're coming off. Let's see here. Important step to your hot rod Emeking. Get rid of the tech stickers for sure. I mean, or not. It's up to you. I know this is what you were all waiting for this video, is to watch me remove stickers, but part of it, so we're doing it. I might edit out the sticker digging and not torture you with watching this. All right, got that one off, and then we have that one came off a little easier. All right, sticker off, and the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to a little dirt on my brand new Emek here. We're going to take off the ASA that comes on these. Is not an on-off. You just screw the bottle in and hope for the best, and that's no good for us. We want to have the cool on-off ASA, and we have it right here. This is the Pops. I don't know why I'm reaching over there. This is the Pops ASA with a little slide on-off. Very cool. So we're going to start with that, and let's see. All right, and this is just 2 bolts, and this will come right out the bottom, and we're going to pop the grips off here in a second, but if I remember correctly, just these 2 hold it on, and the adjuster just goes straight into the rag. Yep, that just slides out, and here we have the rag. So here, before we continue, I'm going to pop off the grips real quick just so we can see better. Oh yeah, I always forget this thing. So to pop the grips off, we got to slide out this rear plastic piece, slides out, and then the back portion just snaps off here, and that comes off, and then the fronts just sort of peel off, and now we have the grip off. Okay, So, in order to install our pops, we've got to remove all of this. And this is brand new, as I've mentioned a couple times now, so we don't need to do anything to it apart from screw this out. And we can see this entire piece as a whole screws out. And the O-rings are nicely greased. Because this has never been assembled, I'm going to go ahead and get out my trusty Dow 33. And I'm going to put just a little bit of grease on the inside of this bore where the O-rings seat, just to be thorough. That part looks to have plenty of grease on it, so maybe not necessary. We do that whole thing, and then this piece slips right into here, and this threads together. And now we have the Pops ASA installed. And this is going to go right back on, back the same way. By the way, you see this O-ring here seats up into the fitting up in the grip, but it's already greased from being new. So we're just going to go ahead and put this back in here. And we're going to put the bolt straight back in. One Pops ASA successfully installed. Whenever you're tightening something that has side-by-side or a row of fasteners or in a circle, you always want to tighten them just enough to snug them up and then go back and give them the last little snug. Don't tighten one all the way down with the other one all the way loose, because you run the risk of cocking at one side or the other, and you want it to be even. So there we go, Pops ASA Mod 1 complete. And next thing we're going to do is we're going to disassemble the bolt out of here and completely take this apart, because we're not even going to use this body. So the way that this comes apart, and if I remember correctly, it's 3/16. Yep. The bolt threads out the back. You can do it with your hands, but I start it with a wrench sometimes because it's easier. This knob is the easiest to grab right in the back. And we're going to address that with one of our cool hot rod parts. But this unthreads the rear cap. And once you're done unthreading it, gamma core. And we're just going to put this aside for now. And we have our bare gun body and frame. And then we're going to take this apart so as to separate the halves. And in order to do that, I believe, see if I can continue. No, I think I pulled the wrong one here. Gonna take our 1/8 Allen. And actually, no, it'll be easier. I think I have this right here. Yeah. As long as it's not too tight, this will be a little easier. A ball end. No, can't get it. Let me find a standard Allen key for that. Let's see. All right. I should have probably done this when I had the ASA off because it was in the way of the Allen wrench, but no big deal. We can just start it with this and then spin it off. All right, got that screw out, put that aside. And then there's another screw here underneath the trigger guard. So we're going to pull that one out as well. You know, one thing, older guns back in the day, a lot of times, especially with aftermarket trigger frames, which of course this doesn't have one, when there was a screw underneath the trigger guard, they would put a hole in the trigger guard so that it was an easy matter to just stick the Allen wrench straight through and get to the screws. I don't know, none of the guns that I have that are modern ones do that. And I'm not sure why that is. But, I mean, ball end Allen wrenches go a long way toward making it easy to get to these fasteners, but it would be easier if they would put a little hole there. But anyway, so that comes apart. You can see I've taken the screws out, and the way this comes apart is you lift the back off and then slide it forward, and this little tongue here that fits in that tab just comes out. So that's together, that's apart. All right, now, out of here, we are going to take this apart. We'll put this aside for a minute. We're going to take this apart real quick. And the only reason for that is I'm going to use the detents. I'm not even going to use these eye covers because the other body that I've got has its own eye covers. But we're going to take these off just so that I can get the detents out. And the detents just fall out. There's a little space you can put a pick in there and grab it. I don't have any fingernails, so I use my little poker to get that out. And we'll just put this aside temporarily. And then, whoops, we'll take this side off. All right, and I'll grab the detent out of this side. And these little rubber detents, they just pop right out, no problem at all. You can see there, if you can see on the video. You don't want to damage those. I used a sharp pick. You gotta be careful not to beat those up. Detents are important to make sure your gun stays easy on paint. All right, so now that we've done that, inside this plastic body, there's a metal sleeve that the bolt in turn goes into, and the trigger mechanism works through and such, and the frame threads to it, all those things. And this body just slides out the back once you've got it apart. And so we're going to do that now. I believe it doesn't have, I don't think it has a catch on it. The pals doesn't have to come off. What am I forgetting? Does it have something else that needs to come off in order to get this out? Let's see. I can't remember if the pals goes all the way down there or not. Let's pop the feed neck off real quick. And I'm not going to edit this out, because half of my point here is that I am no mechanical mastermind by any stretch. And I don't want anyone to feel like doing this work is beyond their capability as a paintball gun mechanic, all right? Because it's easy to do. I meant to pop that all the way off. All right, so I'm probably going to need to pry that apart just a little bit in order to get this off. Let me grab my small screwdrivers here. Let's see. No, I have one here somewhere. Here we are. All right, I'm gonna try to get this down to the bottom where the threads are for that bottom bolt. And then just wiggle this off if I can. I don't want to crack it. I'm trying to be careful with it. I'm just prying it apart a little bit. There we go, so it'll come off. And let's see, was that what was holding it in the, yeah, see, this PALS pin is what I was trying to remember if it held it in or not. The PALS is a pneumatically assisted feed where when the gun fires, did I put it in backwards? I might have. I forget which way this goes in now that I have it apart. I don't ever use these things. Let's see. Anyway, the point is that the little plunger pushes up into the hopper and helps agitate the paint for it to feed. And that pin was down inside and stopping the tube coming out. We're not using any of this, so I'm just going to put this aside. And now the inside sleeve just comes out of the body, and this is going to be orphaned for us right now. We'll save it. Maybe we'll get it hydro dipped and come up with a new design or sand it down or who knows what. But so now we've got this all apart. We're going to take our new super cool body. I bought this. I don't remember the vendor. If someone's curious, I'll look. But it's just a smooth, like a tube body. And then Simon's Hydrographics dipped this for me in a matching hopper, which you get to check out in a bit. And this simply slides in just like the other one came out. So we're going to push this in. Right, and now we've got this installed. You can see that's where our detent, this is where our detents were, feed neck's going to go on, etc. So we got this in. Right now, I'm going to put this aside and as a unit, and we're going to work on getting the trigger and hair valve done. So let's put this aside, put these tools aside. No, we don't need that anymore. And we're back here. Okay, so in order to do these parts, we're going to pull out the valve that's in here, and we're going to use this there's a little rubber seal, and we're going to reuse that with the hair valve. So we're going to pop, that just comes right out, no problem. And then we're going to disassemble, there's screws in here. We're going to take these screws out, and that way we can get to this entire mechanism. So these are Phillips heads. A little bit stiff the first time. Like I mentioned, this is a brand new gun. I never even fired it before doing this. All right, one screw. So because of that, being new, it's never been apart. It's just been assembled at the factory, and that was it. So the screws might be a little bit stiff, and they're pretty small. So when you do this, make sure you have the right size screwdriver to go in these little tiny screws, and make sure they're fresh screwdrivers with good tips, like not really old, worn down to a nub screwdrivers, because these little screws can easily bung up those heads and and strip them so that they're hard to get out or otherwise ruin them. And you don't want to do that. So make sure you've got the right size screwdriver that really gets a good bite on those little tiny Phillips heads. And if you do that, this will come apart no problemo. All right, so those are the 4 screws. This is the plate that was on here. You see the trigger spring is in the top. We're just going to pop that out. And this cover, if we're going to put it back in here for a second. This held in the spring over the top of that mechanism, and also is what, well, does it engage the safety or just holds it down? I'm actually not sure how that engages. I think it just engages the trigger. Yeah, but anyway, so that plate comes off when the screws come out. Trigger spring sits right on top of the trigger itself right there. And that simply comes out. It was being held down by this plate, right? You can see, actually it went this way, right? The spring fits in that little round raised portion, and it was holding it down. So we've taken that out, take the spring out, and now we're going to take out the trigger. And the trigger pin comes out by simply pushing it out. I'm going to use my trusty stack of knucklehead stickers as something soft to put this on. And if I remember correctly, I'm looking at it, yeah, it comes out in this direction. So I have these are hinge pins from old Spire hoppers, and they work perfectly to pop out these pins. They're slightly smaller than the pin. You can rest your hand right in the grip here. It's not too hard to get it out. We're just going to line up this pin. I say that right before I do it. We'll see how hard it is. Line that up, and then I've got my little mini hammer here. Actually, can I start it? I can start it like this when it's flat. All right. You can see that pin has pushed out. Now it's sticking out the other side. And in order, it didn't quite get it enough. So I'm going to put it back up here. And I'm going to show you once I pull it out. There we go. When this pin comes out, it's got a little knurled portion, and that's all that retains it in the frame. There's no threads or anything. It just pushes in there. It's an interference fit against that little knurled portion. And yeah, that's that. So let me see. There was other. I'm trying to remember this other pin. Oh, this holds the valve in. Right. So here's an interesting thing. This pin holds the existing valve setup in here. You can see it fits in the frame right there. And once you've got this apart, it just falls out. Okay, and we're going to save that, and I'll show you why in a few minutes. We're going to save that. But right now, what we need to do is this metal block portion, and it has another one of those seals on it, comes right off the top of the valve. And we only need one, because the hair valve, this whole assembly is one piece in the hair valve. So we only need the one seal. But this is the top portion of the stock valve. And then the rest of this just falls out. And those two pieces together are the stock trigger mechanism. Now, if you've heard of a bang switch, we're not using a bang switch. I'm not going to take this apart right now, but this red piece in here, you can see me moving back and forth. That's the little three-way. There's O-rings on that shaft inside that direct the air through the passages, and that's what fires. If you were to buy a bang switch, the bang switch is another pin that they mill with slightly different specs to change the spacing of the passages to make the trigger quicker. That's what a bang switch is. And you use all the stock pieces of the trigger mechanism or the valve to install a bang switch. Now we're not doing that, so all of this is going to be put aside. We'll just put it over here, okay? And the trigger, we've removed the pin that pushes right out the top and falls out. We're not going to use that. So now we pretty much, all we have in here is the stock trigger pin, which is the actor or valve pin, which the trigger acts on to activate the valve, and the safety, and there's a retaining pin over the top that we leave in there. That's this brass piece. Okay, so here we have the hair valve, hair 45 valve. And this is a straight up drop in. And let me make sure I get the orientation of it right. I should have looked before I took it out. It goes, the pin, that aluminum pin you can see in there, the trigger axon I was mentioning, acts right on here. And this circle here, this hole, fits right over the top of the air passage. Now remember, when I put that back in there, it had fresh grease on it. We don't need to worry about that. We're simply going to drop this in, and it snaps into place. And now we're going to take this piece that we saved, and we're going to put it right back here, right? And that is the entire installation of the hair 45 valve. You simply drop it in there. Now the next thing we're going to do is a trigger, and I have a little bit to say about the trigger. I got some red accents like this, and I've got my barrel. This is part of my disruptive Death Touch kit, which is, I'm going to talk about that a little later on. It's an awesome value, like 140 bucks, and you get, I think, 5 backs and a colored tip, and then the extra tips, if you want different colors, are only $15. Super good value, and these things shoot lasers. They're super good barrels. But anyway, you can see I got all these red accents going on, and I bought this red Infamous trigger. Now, a lot of people like the Infamous triggers. In the past, I've tried 2 of them when I built the very first 2 of these I ever did, and in both cases, the Infamous trigger did not allow enough pre-travel. That's the forward travel to allow the valve to fully return, and because of that, it wouldn't cycle reliably. And this is a newer generation of trigger. I don't even know if that was something that was caused, by like variants in the actual gun I was working on, or what it was. But lots of people like these, and I really like the way they look, and I like that they're fully adjustable. So I'm going to try one again, and we're going to find out together if the Infamous trigger is going to be good for us or not. So what we're doing is we're going to drop this in the same way the other trigger came out, which is to say just like that. And I'm going to line up the hole. You can't really see that, I'm sure, in the video, but we're going to line up the hole, and the Infamous trigger comes with a new pin. It still uses the knurled surface to retain, but it has a little cool skull thing on the end. But we're going to put this back. Look, it went right through there. And now the trigger is installed. And the safety still works, by the way. If you push all the way forward, you can push the safety, and this won't move at all. And this pin is in. Now, I am going to give this a little tap, because it slipped in there pretty easy. I wouldn't want to lose it. Let me try to pull on it. No, it's in there good. So the trigger is in, okay? So we've got that. Next, now you notice this was the stock trigger that came out. I had laying on my bench, I have a couple other trigger springs. These are stock springs, these. And then this one is actually a stiffer spring. Now, a lot of times people are always in a quest for lighter springs. The stiffer spring will give you a faster return. So depending on your style of pulling the trigger, for some people, a stiffer spring is actually faster to shoot than the stock spring. I just wanted to show you that I had that. I'm not going to use a stiffer spring. I'm actually going to put the stock spring in. I have a lighter spring as well. I'm not sure. I think it's in my spares box that I bring to the field right now, but I'm not going to use that right now. I'm going to use the stock spring. Now, interestingly, you can use these with no trigger spring if you so desire. But I'm going to put this on. Oh, I think I am. The spring doesn't want to go over the... Oh, you know what? We might be using this one with no spring. Yeah, what I was going to say is that the air pressure resetting the valve is sufficient to push the trigger back. You don't even need a spring. Just out of curiosity, I'm going to try this different one. So this is the problem I'm having. You can't really see it. The stock trigger, this piece right here, you can see the spring fits right over that. And then that cap, this thing, goes over it and holds it down, right? And that's what you're pulling against. And this is the spring I was using, but still you can see fits right over there. Well, interestingly, the infamous trigger did not come with any springs, and it does have that piece, but in fact, now I look at it, it's obviously too big. That little prong sort of that sticks up, or that land for the spring, is too big, and this spring will not go on there. And even if I try to bend it and twist it and thread it on, I can't. Let me try one more time. Yeah, that's not going on there. So we're going to put it together without a spring and see how it goes. Lots of people use them without a spring. It's really not a huge deal. So we'll just give it a go. But we're going to put this in. This is going to go back together like so. And now we're back to our little tiny screws. Oops. I'm old and my eyes aren't the best, so I struggle with these little screws a little bit sometimes. Talk about compelling video making. Watch as Dave struggles with tiny screws. Very exciting, I know. Well, you don't want to drop them, that's for sure. Let's put a front one in first. A little bit easier to get to. And same deal I mentioned before with this thing, is you don't want to put one screw in and just jam it all the way down. Put one in one of the corners and get it so that it's snug, but not to where it's deforming the, making it so this piece doesn't lay flat. Ugh. Come on, you. There it goes. And then I went to the opposite corner, and I'm going to put this one in. Same thing, not all the way tight. But you can see I've put in this diagonally across, and then I'm going to go and put these other screws in. And doing it this way is what helps you ensure, and I don't mean just with an Emek or just this piece, just mechanical assemblies in general. When you do this, you help ensure that the piece stays flat and seats properly against whatever it is that it seats against, in this case the trigger frame. Now, just in case you happen to have gearhead aspirations, this is especially important for any part you're putting on that is a cover or otherwise a piece that has a gasket underneath it or a seal. You definitely want to do it that way by alternating. If it's a circle shape or whatever, you want to do like a star and go back and forth across in order to not deform that gasket or seal when you're putting the part back on. But we don't really have anything in paintball that applies to. I just thought I'd mention it. Always a good idea to assemble things that way. Alright, so now we have all 4 screws in. And now I'm going to go diagonally over here, and I'm going to snug up each one. And then down here, these actually go a little farther. I'm turning them. I'm a little wary of over tightening. There we go. Better safe than sorry when you're threading things into plastic. I mean, really, that's better safe than sorry no matter what. But all right, so that's all together. Now we've got our hair valve installed. We've got our infamous trigger installed. We've got our super cool body ready to go. We've got our Pops ASA. Now I'm going to go ahead and put this on. Remember I mentioned, hook this over the front, and then this goes down like this, and we're going to go ahead and put it together. So these screws are right here. Here's one of them. And let's see, where did I put that Allen wrench down? I think it is. No, it's not that one. What do we do with that Allen wrench, internet people? Here it is. And it's a little tedious just because, like I mentioned, the access is a little bit, you know, even the bend runs into the frame. So really it's probably faster to just go a little bit at a time and do it this way rather than try to spin the wrench. Oops. And same with that. I don't want it to be all the way tight, just snug. And then we're going to put this other screw in. And once we've got them both in, then we'll alternate back and forth and make sure they get tight. One's almost tight. And by the way, another tip, ball ends are cool, but you want to be careful. It's very easy for a ball end Allen to not be fully inserted into the fastener that you're turning. And when you do that and then apply torque to it, it can strip the screw. You don't want to do that. So you always want to make extra sure that whether it's a ball end or not, really, make sure the thing is fully in there before you try to turn it. If I had a nickel for every used gun I got in here where the frame screws were like almost round on the inside because people don't pay attention to getting the tool in there all the way, I'd have a lot of nickels, I tell you. All right, so now we got that together, pretty cool. Let's go ahead and get the grips back on. The grips just pop right on. As I mentioned, front fits in. There's little tabs that go underneath the frame on top on each side. And then the back fits on. You kind of go at an angle like this, snaps on. These little tabs snap over, and then once those are in place, you push this back in, grips are back on. Next, we've got our little detents that we took off earlier, you can see, and we're going to put the detents back in the spot where they go. Make sure it's flat. And now I have these cool eye covers that go with this body. They're going to fit in here instead of the stockers. Pretty cool. This detent. Make sure it's flat. Get our eye cover, or I call them eye covers, of course no eyes in Emek, but our detent covers, I guess. There it goes. As you can imagine, aftermarket 3D printed body, pieces don't quite fit as tightly as factory Planet Eclipse, because what does, right? I mean, nobody has better quality manufacturer than Planet Eclipse, and some dude 3D printing body is not going to be any different. But it does fit well. The inner tube went right in, the covers went right on, it all matched up. The frame had no problem attaching, which means all the points on the inside still ended up in the same spot. So overall, very nice. Next thing we're going to do is our Emek feed neck. And these have a pretty cool thing. So when I first got one of these, it didn't have the plastic thing here, and I had a heck of a time getting it on. And then I realized it was missing that part. So what they do is they give you this, it's a shim, right? You see the screw is here. That screw actually goes in this side when you install it. But the idea is they start it over here, and they screw it against this plastic shim and force the clamp apart a little bit so that you can get it on. And once you have it on, then you actually back out. Let me make sure I get the right. Is it this one? Nope. I'll find the right one. Give me a minute. Still not it. I thought sure I had it out. Let's see. There it is. It's a 7/64. We're going to loosen here. Let me put it this way so you can see. Oh, I loosened it just a little bit. See, this fell out. So I'm going to take this screw all the way out. And I'm going to flip it over and put it in this side. You can tell it has the more machined pocket for the head to go into. So I'm going to put it in there. And then I'm going to just double check it and make sure it's... Oh, you know what? I forgot something. I remember we saved this pin. Used to be the retaining pin for the valve. It actually goes through this hole when this old portion of the valve was in the gun. I forgot about this part. And I mentioned we're saving that. Here's why. So we're going to take this back apart. And like I mentioned before, I make mistakes like anybody else. I forgot to do this. So we're going to do that. I'm going to put this, you can see the shim in action. I'm not even going to try to take it off without doing this because I don't want to wreck the neck. So I put the shim in. Then I'm going to put this screw back in. At least I think I'm going to put the screw back in. Come on, buddy, get in there. There it goes. I'll tighten it against that shim, and I'm going to give it a few extra turns. And this will now push the feed neck apart. So I can easily get it off. You can see where my my hydro dip scraped off a little bit because that neck is clamped on there hard. But this stuff's very durable. It's worked great. But check this out. Remember our Pals plunger that we took out? That was, let's see, what did I do with it? This plastic plunger, it fits in here and it would pop up and down if you have a Pals hopper to agitate the paint. Well, we're not doing that, right? There's two things you can do. You can snip off the bottom and drop this in, or this brass pin that used to retain the valve just so happens to fit in that hole. Let me see if I remember correctly. Did I do it that way? Yeah, did it that way. You can put it in there. Well, you know what? It looks a little different when it's not the stock body. Let me just look at this real quick. Was it this way? Or did I do it this? No, it's this way. Down. Put this down in that hole. Like that. And then you can put the that little O-ring in there, seats inside that Pals port so the air won't blow up the feed neck. And then you put this over it. Pretty awesome. You repurpose that pin. The only thing is you got to remember you did that if you ever go to sell your Emek and you like put the stock valve back in. You're going to be like, what did I do with that pin? Why don't I have that pin? Well, you used it in your feed neck to block off the Pals. That's where it is. So we're going to unthread that, take out the shim, reverse the screw to the other side, and then we're going to put this screw in. It's funny, I have a confession to make. You know, the way I discovered that is that, oh yeah, so here, I'm going to try, hopefully you can see. You can see half of that brass pin in there. It's being held in. It's being retained by the neck. So it can't come out. It can't fit in because that end on the head is up against the part where this thin piece used to go through. Now it's just a very thin slot and that pin hits it. It can't fall in. It can't come out because the feed neck's retaining it. It's like a perfect repurposing. And what I was going to say is my confession is that the first time I took one apart, and you might have remembered when I was taking that valve apart, that brass pin just fell out. Well, that happened to me when I was doing, I got a little bit crooked, when I was building the first one I ever built, and I didn't see it come out right away. So I had one of those situations where I was almost done putting the gun together. I'm just straightening this out a little bit. I got it slightly crooked is all. I was putting the gun back together, and I suddenly realized I had this extra part, and I had no idea where it went. and I noticed that it fit in the PALS hole, and that's good right there. I fit in the PALS hole, so I tried that, and it worked awesome. So I've been doing that ever since. Just like I said, remember, if you ever put it back to stock. All right, that's that. Almost complete. Put our shim aside. Yeah, if you're ever going to put it back to stock, you got to remember you put your valve pin. Not the valve pin for the trigger, but the retaining pin that goes through this hole is now in your feed neck. So you got to remember that. All right. One last item. This knob is not very cool looking, and it's not that easy to grab, frankly. If the bolt's a little bit loose, you can do it with your fingers, but the reason they put the Allen hex holes on the sides of this thing is because you need a wrench to get it off, you know, a lot of the time, especially if it's tight. This just pops right off here with one screw. There's the screw, and here's the plastic piece. And I bought this super cool looking red aluminum piece to replace it. And I don't know yet, if I've never tried this one. I have a different one and a different gun I built, but this one looked cool. And we all know that's what matters most. I don't know if it's going to be easier to grab or not, but it's going to look awesome. So I'm putting this in here. Oh yeah, I should have showed you, I'm sorry. There's a bunch of holes in the back of this, and just like the stock piece, this has just like that, right? You simply fit those, you can put them anywhere. The orientation doesn't matter. You just put it on however it fits, and then drop the screw in and screw it back in. In fact, I'm going to grab a little bit of blue Loctite. There's no Loctite on this, and when you put aluminum instead of plastic, when you put the screw versus plastic, it compresses that plastic a little bit and holds it in very nicely. When you screw it with aluminum, now this is blue Loctite. No, whoops, that's a little bit too much Loctite. You don't need much. And it's blue, not red. It's in a red bottle, but it's not red Loctite. You do never red Loctite anything unless your goal is to make certain that it never comes apart again, no matter how hard you try. That's the only reason to use red Loctite. Now, it doesn't mean it's impossible to get it apart, but it's very hard. Blue Loctite is simply for stugging up fasteners so they don't vibrate loose. It'll never make it impossible to get out. There. So yeah, fits right on there. Cool looking. Yeah, blue Loctite. It'll never make it too hard to get apart, etc. All right, so we have one thing left here. This has the stock bolt in it, and I'm going to tell you, the stock bolt performs extremely well. There's nothing wrong with the stock bolt. If you're going to play in extremely cold temperatures with very brittle paint, Planet Eclipse does make, in fact, I have one right here, a soft tip bolt you can replace it with. And I've been waiting to do this work for so long. This is a Stanchi Customs soft tip bolt, and I had bought this before the other bolts were available, and I've just been waiting to do this for so long. I finally got it. And besides, it's red, so who can argue with that, right? But I've heard plenty of good reviews of this. I'm sure it works fine. We're going to try it out. And mostly I'm doing this just because I want to modify this as much as I can modify it. Unless you're playing in very cold temperature with very brittle paint, the stock bolt's completely fine. There's no other performance change as a result of using a soft tip bolt, whether it's the Stanchi bolt or the Planet Eclipse bolt. And if you were to ask the Planet Eclipse folks, they would tell you the same thing. We're going to pop, that just simply pops out the bottom. We're going to put that aside. And before I put this in, I'm going to put a little bit of the old Dow 33 light on here. And I'm going to put it on this. Now the second O-ring is a bumper, but you can't really get grease on one without the other, so they're both getting a little bit of grease. All right, and then this simply fits in here. You push it right through like that, and then this goes back together. We now have a super Stanchi equipped Gamma core with the soft tip bolt. And we're going to put this back together. Oh yeah, see, I can tell you these surfaces are a little bit sharper and deeper, and the cap's a little bit longer compared to the stock. And all of those things together make this much easier to grab and turn with my bare hands. That's very cool. So we're going to do that. And it's the second to last crowning touch. My Disruptive Death Touch barrel. Now this color admittedly does not exactly match the other red accents, but until I get one that does, and I'm going to, it was pretty close. So look, here we have completely built custom Emek, and we're gonna go back to my table and get a better view of it and gas it up and see what's what. So let's head over there. All right, so here we are, hot rodded Emek. I had to show off my matching hopper that I had Simon's Hydrographics do, and I keep mentioning his name, and like I've done in so many videos, as usual, I'm not plugging him because he gave me free hydro dipping or whatever. I paid full price, my own money to have this done, and I'm just mentioning his name to you because if you want hydro dipping done, he does a great job, and this thing looks just sick. It is awesome. Very cool. All the parts work. However, we do have something to address. I mentioned my reservations about the infamous trigger, and I've said this before, I mentioned it in the video when I was putting it together. Let's pop this off. I previously had, boy, I had that on there pretty tight. I previously had an issue where there wasn't enough pre-travel to properly adjust the trigger. And this is the latest, as far as I know anyway, the latest iteration of this trigger. Let me wipe my little flakes out of here. By the way, when you first get a hopper hydro dip, so you know, don't panic. When you jam it into your feed neck, if it's tight, you're gonna lose the dip on the portion of that clamps in there. It doesn't like keep propagating and come off or anything like that. It's all good. So this trigger, this is the same way. The way it adjusts is a little bit different. There's a pre-travel screw in the top, like most triggers, and the idea would be that if you back that screw down this way, that would allow the trigger to be able to move increasingly forward, right? Because the screw wouldn't be hitting the frame up here, and as you drop the screw down, the trigger would be able to move forward. Well, here's the problem: is as delivered, the screw is flush, meaning the only way you can adjust it is to have less pre-travel, right, to move the trigger back. And that position is already too far back. The trigger pin that comes out of the valve, or the valve pin that goes into the trigger, the way the infamous trigger does it is they've machined out relief in the trigger, so that pin actually goes inside the trigger. And if you can see, there's a set screw right here. I know you probably can't see that. It doesn't matter. There's a set screw there, and that screw adjusts where the trigger engages that pin. And those two elements are important because if the valve pin can't fully return, like you need a tiny bit of free play when the valve is returned. I mean just the tiniest bit, just enough so that you know that the trigger isn't holding that pin in against the valve. You got to make sure it fully returns in order to reliably cycle the gun. And you might be able to see that I've got this set screw protruding a little bit. And the reason for that is that if I adjust this screw so that it's flush, meaning I'm not getting it on my finger, it's like smooth there, the combination of that screw being in that amount and the pre-travel being useless, because even when it's backed all the way out, that's as much as you get. When you do those two things, the pin is being pushed in. So again, and a lot of people use these, and I don't know if it's they just don't care if their finger hits the trigger or what. And man, it looks awesome. The machining is cool. I'm very sad that I'm going to remove this thing because, you know, it matches the gun. It looks so cool with the red accent on it, but it just doesn't work properly. It needs to have a different shape at the top so that the pre-travel is actually a meaningful adjustment, so that with the screw backed all the way down, it should have way more than enough pre-travel so that you can use the screw to adjust the pre-travel. Like, that's the point. But when it's all the way out, you still don't have enough. So you can't, you could never use it to like take some up because there's already too much taken up. And this, like I said, with the valve pin here and this adjustment screw, in order to get even, like, I'm talking about like less than a millimeter, like the tiniest amount of free play, just so I can tell Like it just barely wiggles, like just so I can tell it's not pressing on it. And the set screw is like a whole turn out into where my finger goes. So when I'm pulling this, like my finger is getting chewed up by that set screw. If I put the screw in just barely enough for it to be flush, that's too far, and the pin is being pressed in. So I'll be right back with the oh yeah, of course, then the other thing is, I mentioned you can run it without a spring, but you don't have the option of the spring unless you get a different spring or file that piece down or whatever. And I'm going to swap this out for an Emek trigger, which does have full range of adjustment and allows for the spring. So yeah, I'll be back. All right, so we're back. I've installed the Emek trigger now. And you're not going to be able to see this for sure outside, but there is now a tiniest bit of free play, which is what you need. And I've adjusted the stop to get a very short pull. And everything is working fantastic. I mean, how cool does this thing look? It is awesome. I'm really digging this thing. It feels great. Everything's working great. I'm not sure what's up with that trigger. I'm going to see if I can't email Infamous and see if I get some information about that. Or maybe there's a different valve pin I'm supposed to be using that I'm not aware of, because a change in the length of that pin would alleviate all those issues at the same time. It would change the trigger position and how much play it had and where it activated. So maybe I'm missing something, but we'll find out. But in any case, here we have it. We got the cool 3D printed body. I got off Shapeways, dipped by Simon's Hydrographics. The red accents are super cool. I'm just really digging this thing, and it shoots great. And I'm going to warn you guys, by the way, I think I have the worst paint in the history of paint in here. I don't have a single gun in my possession that will shoot it. Every single gun I have is a blender when I shoot this paint. If I make it through this hopper without breaking a ball, that would be a miracle. But it's not the gun, I promise you. The paint is terrible. But here, let's give it a go and see what it's all about. Oh, these feel so good. So good. All right, let's let it rip. I want to stop right there because I haven't broken any paint yet. But how cool is that for a mech, right? Well, maybe this is the one gun that'll shoot it. I haven't broken a ball yet, knock on wood. Pretty cool. Hot rodded Emek. Oh, that's it, I think. Yep. Oh, no. Still one rattling around in there. That's it. All right. Emek, what do you think? All right. So, yeah. I mean, it shoots great. I mentioned the business with the trigger. Now, you notice, I did put the trigger spring back in this. I'm using the stock spring, and I kind of like it with that kind of firmish spring. Lots of people use them without springs, and like I mentioned, you can't use the regular springs, at least on the Infamous trigger. But yeah, with this trigger, you get the proper range of adjustment that allows you to have a little bit of free play and still a short pull. You can see in the video, I certainly don't have any problems shooting it pretty fast. It works great. I kind of miss that it's not red, and I'm going to get in contact with the Infamous guys, and you know, I'm not trying to throw them under the bus. Certainly, lots of people like those triggers, and it's certainly possible that that there's like a missing link here somewhere. Like one thing, a different pin for the valve would take care of all those issues at the same time, except for the spring, right? But if that thing was slightly shorter, then you'd have the necessary adjustment. So maybe I'm supposed to be using a different pin. And I wasn't aware of that. I'm not really sure, but I'm going to find out what the scoop is there, and I'll have a follow-up at some point and let you know what's up with that. But as delivered, the Emek trigger works great. We've got the Exalt aluminum machined rear cap, Emek feed neck. We've got the super stanchy soft tip bolt in there. The Shapeways, and I don't remember which vendor I got the 3D printed body from. I'll put a link below for sure. Super cool looking. I really like that. It's just a streamlined, simple tube look. And of course, this amazing dipping from Simon's Hydrographics. And we've got the Pops ASA. And then I mentioned the barrel. This is the Disruptive Paintball Death Touch kit. And it comes with, I think, 5 backs and a tip. They're $140 with a case. It's a really good value. They're very high quality barrels. They're very quiet. And I mentioned earlier, the tips they have a bunch of different colors. I've got a green, a blue, the red one, a gloss black, I think. And they're $15 each for the tips. So I mean, it's hard to go wrong. I mean, they shoot great, and they're not super pricey. Super good value for that. And Simon's did the amazing job. Simon's Hydrographics dipping these things. I hope it comes through on the video. I mean, it looks amazing. I couldn't be happy with how this thing looks. It really looks cool with the gloss finish and the matching dip on those. Awesome. I'd like to hear what you think about it. I think it's fun to shoot. It's really fun. It's kind of like a throwback to the old days where you can really do a lot of custom work on your gun. If you don't shoot autocockers, there's not a whole lot of customization you can do anymore. And these things, I mean, there's barely anything left stock. And I've got the stock grips still. Didn't color those. The core is the same, even though we put a different bolt on it, and the whole rest of it's all different, which is pretty fun to modify and hot rod and make them your own. But let me know what you think. Put some comments below. I always say I appreciate it if you would like the videos and subscribe. It'd be super helpful to find them in the search results when people do that. And I appreciate you coming by. We'll see you next time.